All right. Good afternoon, everyone. We'll go on ahead and get started with our webinar for today. First of all, thank you all for attending, and we hope that you find these beneficial. They're being co-hosted by the Seguin Development Corporation and the Seguin Main Street and Convention and Visitors Bureau Department. And so we're glad that you're able to join us. My name is Kyle Cram, and I am the City of Seguin's Main Street and CVB Director. And so just real quick, I want to let you know that if you need assistance for any small business questions, we are here to assist. Both myself as with the Main Street and CVB and Josh Schmeicher with the Economic Development Corporation. So feel free to reach out to us anytime if you have any questions. And one of the best things that we have for our small businesses I want to make sure y'all are all aware of this, is we do have a free small business consultant. His name is Larry New, and he is in Seguin. Well, post-COVID, he'll be in Seguin every Tuesday. And so you can meet with him one-on-one individually for free about any issues that you are having with your business. Do want to let you know that we are recording this webinar today, and so we will be emailing out the recording to all our registered participants. And I'd also like to thank our sponsors who have made this possible. That include GBC and Anders Pierce Realty. If you have any questions today throughout the webinar that's going on, feel free to put the questions in the Q&A box or in the chat box. We'll be checking both. Deirdre, our speaker, will be stopping from time to time to answer any questions that you might have. In addition, in the chat box, there is a link to the SBDC's business recovery website, which is what Deirdre will be going over. So we encourage you to, if you want to check that out while she is talking, you can do that, or just have that website saved in your bookmarks. I'd like to introduce Deirdre Patillo. She is currently serving as a project manager for the UTSA Small Business Development Center COVID Business Recovery Accelerator. She has served as the Southwest Texas Border SBDC Network Community since 1998, spending the majority of this time specifically focused on human resources training and advising. Since 2005, she has assisted small business owners and supported their advising staff with emergency preparedness and disaster response resources and training. As a certified senior professional in human resources, Deirdre provides direct assistance to small business employers in the areas of employment practices, emergency preparedness, regulatory compliance, job site safety, drug-free workplace, and effective HR management. Her goal is to be a key resource for the people side of small business. All right, and so now I'm going to stop sharing my screen and allow Deirdre to start sharing hers.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be with y'all this afternoon. And Kyle, if you could just confirm that you are able to see the business recovery website. Looks as though I am sharing it. Okay, since I'm not hearing anything to the contrary, I'm going to believe that everyone can see it. And I am glad to be with y'all today. My name is Deirdre Patillo. Not that I'm testing anyone on it. Do not worry. I totally understand people, read it phonetically. You can call me anything, just not late for dinner. So I'm very, very happy to be with y'all today. And I do want to call attention to one thing that Kyle had just mentioned, and that is my colleague Larry New is definitely available to y'all, and I'm trying to, let's see, I'm going to have to move something over. There we go. Hope everyone can see that screen comfortably. You can find Larry's contact there on the EDC's website, and so please do call on him. He is an excellent resource, and all of the resources I'm going to talk to you about today, we want to make sure that they are available to you, but our goal is not just to send you to a website and expect you to fend for yourself. Our goal is to ensure that you have the resources to really explore what kind of assistance you need, and that can help you better shape your time with one of our business advisors, such as Larry, or if you're in any other communities, we'll make sure to get you to the right advisor in your community. So,
real quick,
yes.
You're sharing your emails.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, let's see. How did that happen? Let's try this again, shall we? And thank you for letting me know that. Okay, let's try this again. It says I am sharing the Business Recovery Accelerator. Is that correct now?
Yes, now it's okay.
Okay, very good. I wonder if it's because I moved something. Okay, so the Southwest Texas Border SBDC network covers a 79 county region, starting at the far west tip in El Paso, running down to the southmost area of Brownsville, from the Big Bend over to the Victoria area and all of this Gulf Coast area you see here. So small business development centers are actually across the nation. You can find, I always tell folks, you know, you can find a small business development center consultant in your local community in Seguin, and you can find a small business development consultant in South Carolina. So we're all over the nation in protectorates. Here in Texas, we're sort of interesting. There are 4 regional networks in the state of Texas. We are the largest geographic region. We cover the largest swath of Texas, but I'm sure you can imagine out in West Texas, we have some counties that have more tumbleweeds and goats than they have people. Our most populous, our largest demographic region in the state of Texas is the University of Houston Gulf Coast region. So while we cover about 79 counties, they cover about 30 something, but they are the more densely populated network. We also have the North Texas region. So from about Waco on up to Texarkana. And then we have the Northwest Texas region from Lubbock on up through the Panhandle. But what we want you to know is no matter where you are in the state of Texas, in the United States, you can find assistance from the small business development centers. So one of the things that the Southwest Texas Border SBDC network did very immediately upon the COVID-19 disaster declaration was establish this business recovery accelerator with a goal of making sure that small businesses have the resources they need to understand the availability of disaster relief in their community and directly to their small business, and making sure that we are kind of a central locus of information on all of the disaster relief programs, responsibilities, and opportunities for small business owners. So we want you to know that if you have a disaster specific question at this time, you can give us a call, you can email us, you can absolutely contact Larry. We are all here to help you, but we want to make sure that we're providing some information, you know, kind of a one-stop place for information, and that's how we designed this website. So we really appreciate your feedback on how you are able to utilize it, or if you're looking for information that you're not seeing here. Now, one of our goals was to make sure we kept the information. We didn't want to overload this website, and we also wanted to try to be able to kind of create discrete, you know, areas of focus, from funding to employer resources, which includes regulatory responsibilities as well as opportunities. Cybersecurity is always an issue for all businesses, but it's a very unique issue during the current crisis. There are specific safety guidelines for safe reopening as well as ongoing functions in your workplace. So we wanted to provide those to you. We're offering ongoing educational resources through upcoming town halls, as well as recordings of the past events that we've had. And we certainly want to make sure everyone knows how important small business is to the state of Texas, to our economy. And so we're happy to be able to feature those businesses who have been able to seek relief and respond effectively, whether pivoting activities or taking advantage of resources. So we hope you'll read those stories. We hope you'll let us know your story in case we have an opportunity to highlight it as well. I always encourage folks to be thinking about preparedness. What can you do today to improve your resiliency for tomorrow? So we'll talk a little bit about the resources available from a preparedness standpoint, which I know is kind of odd since we are in a continuing and ongoing and changing current state of disaster, but preparedness, you can always learn something to improve and take advantage of opportunities and resources for the future. We also have a great handbook that you can download or just refer to here on the website with lots of great links for reopening safely. And we try to keep you apprised of the most recent news and media notices in regard to the current disaster. But let's start with probably the relief issue that is on most folks' mind from a business standpoint, and that is understanding what funding opportunities there are and where to find good information on those opportunities. So we know the number one disaster-related funding source is the SBA, the U.S. Small Business Administration. And I just have to commend the SBA. They have kept this site so well up to date and I think made it very simple to navigate. So this is, again, the one-stop location. You can come by the Business Recovery Accelerator website, click on SBA and go directly to the coronavirus-related SBA funding opportunities. The Paycheck Protection Program, as many of you, I believe, know, the application process was extended currently through August 8th. There's a lot of great information on the SBA's website. I'm not going to go through it in great detail. I will pause in just a moment if anyone has any paycheck or PPP, Triple P, there's so many different names for it. But the Paycheck Protection Program, of course, is an economic stimulus program, designed to ensure that paychecks continue to circulate in our economy. So with the program reopening and application date being extended to August 8th, you still have an opportunity if you have not yet applied for those funds, you still have an opportunity to do so. There have also been extensions in the time period you can utilize the funds. So anyone receiving the funds after June 5th will have an extended time period and some change in the standards for forgiveness. Please note we have some upcoming training events on the details of forgiveness, which are continue to be evolving, but I think this is a great site to go through and understand. What I would tend to tell people right now, if you have not yet applied for the PPP, please talk to your lender, explore what they are looking at in terms of whether they are still extending those application dates. There are some lenders who had participated initially who have not reopened their application. So do be in contact with your lender and or check back here to find lenders who might still be participating. And those include some community-based lenders, some non-traditional lenders. So there are a lot of options. And once again, the Business Recovery Accelerator consultants and Larry, my friend Larry, can also help you with that. So please, take advantage of finding out more if you are still considering. If you are still considering applying for the PPP. Of course, also the Economic Injury Disaster Loan process has reopened as well. Now, the advance, what you may have heard of as the EIDL advance, which was an advance of up to $10,000, a forgivable advance of up to $10,000 based on a $1,000 grant per employee. The advance has not been extended, but the EIDL loan itself, the economic injury disaster loan process, is open. Now, when we talk about disaster relief, one of the interesting things that we're typically talking about that we're not talking about in the current disaster declaration is physical loss. The physical damage disaster loans are usually the largest part of a disaster relief activity on the part of the SBA. Of course, in this disaster, we know that every community was declared impacted by the economic injury, and therefore, any business in the United States is eligible to apply for these funds. There are some differences in this process versus what we might see if we were, I'm sure some folks in your community have been impacted by past physical disaster declarations such as fires and floods. So, we're in a little bit of a different situation now with the economic injury. We know, everyone has the potential to be impacted, but they might be asking for some very specific information for you to be able to show the specific economic injury to your business. This is once again where I encourage you to reach out to the Small Business Development Center. What we have found is sometimes folks, because they have been able, maybe they're an essential business, the nature of your business, you've been able to continue to operate, and perhaps you got a response saying that you couldn't show economic injury. It doesn't mean you cannot apply for reconsideration. We are in the reconsideration period. So whether you have not applied at all, please know you can apply for economic injury disaster lending. If you have applied but received a rejection, please know that you do have 2 opportunities for appeal and reconsideration, and certainly the Business Recovery Accelerator team would be happy to help you with that. Or if you have not heard, you definitely have the opportunity to call, email, or log into the SBA's portal to find out where you are in that EIDL process. So please know there's a lot of information out there. This process ramped up so quickly and was so huge. I've heard all kinds of statistics. I don't know where it stands right now, but I do know in the first month after the EIDL loan program opened up, in 2 weeks, so in 14 days, more EIDL loans were processed than in the previous 14 years. So we're talking about a huge undertaking, and there definitely are some glitches, but there are also, you have recourse if you are experiencing a challenge in receiving information or funding. And so we definitely want to help you find the right answer to your particular situation. If you are already an SBA borrower, hopefully you've already been contacted by your case manager and by your lending institution for any information you need about the current state of your SBA loan. That SBA debt relief, of course, is available to any SBA borrower, and certainly by now you should have received notice of that. But if not, you can always reach out to the SBA and to your lender. There are certain SBA bridge loans that might be available to those who have existing loans or have had a history of a loan with an SBA Express lender. So the SBA activity is, it's a huge amount of activity, but there are resources to help you navigate it. So I hope you will reach out to us. Kyle, do we have any questions right now on any of the SBA lending?
Yes, we do.
Great.
So the first question is, how can businesses pay employees when they have been ordered to shut down?
So with, I'm assuming we're talking about with either SBA, with either PPP or EIDL funds?
Yeah, yes, this business I think received both.
So you absolutely, you can utilize both funds actually. Of course, you do have to segregate them. You need to, in order to participate in PPP forgiveness, you need to accurately show how and when the funds are utilized during your covered period. If you have been ordered to shut down, then effectively those funds could be used to pay for leave for employees. And there are some different ways to do that. I always say, especially when it comes to HR, circumstances, impact the particular case, the regulatory responsibility. And there are other factors in addition to PPP forgiveness that do have to be considered. The number of employees you have, the impact on their total employment, whether or not an individual might be eligible to claim partial unemployment, or whether you furlough someone so that they are able to claim employment and can return to the workplace when you are ready to do so. So there are a variety of things that actually can be done. It really is a factor of looking at your operations. And of course, the goal of the PPP and the EIDL, are economic stimulus, resiliency, and business continuity. So we want to make sure that when you have those funds, they can be used appropriately for the allowable purposes under each program. And, of course, there's some very specific guidelines for each. And that could include some, level of maintaining payroll, and in making an assessment of when folks are able to return to the workplace. I cannot tell you that there's a one right fit for every business. I have found that, what some employers have been able to do is maybe, schedule periods of furlough, partial employment, joint employment. And that's a great point, and that we'll talk about when we come to employer resources and the Texas Workforce Commission's guidance on some of the shared employment opportunities to minimize the number of employees and the extent of unemployment claims. So I don't have one easy answer, but I hope you will look a little bit further into, looking at how you are planning on using those funds for employees, and know that you absolutely can utilize them for paid leave.
Okay. And then another question is, have the percentages changed regarding expenses versus employees?
So yes. What we know as of today for the Paycheck Protection Program Flexibility Act guidelines, when we have the change to the 24-week covered period, we're also looking, instead of at the 75-25 breakdown of payroll costs. So in the 8-week covered period with the initial PPP, what we were looking at was a 75% payroll costs, 25% other allowable costs. With the extended and 24-week covered period, what we're looking at is a 60-40 breakdown on a 60% payroll, 40% other allowable costs. And one of the differences is also, now I will say this is what we understand as of today, with still a number of questions. In the original 75-25 breakdown, there would be a pro rata decrease in forgiveness if there were decreases in the full-time equivalency numbers, or a decrease in the percentage utilized for payroll. Under the extension or the Flexibility Act, 60% of the total PPP loan must be spent on payroll costs, no matter what, qualify for forgiveness at all. In other words, there's no pro rata forgiveness, based on instead of if you spend 59% on payroll costs, then it's not forgivable as things stand today. Once again, I would encourage folks to be communicating with their lenders about the form that will be used to request forgiveness. And while you are making these payroll expenditures, have that forgiveness document in mind. And let's look at it as it stands from the SBA at this point. I think that could be a little bit helpful. We have the FAQs linked, and so we of course still we have the application, which had a revision and is now extended, and then we have the forgiveness application under our FAQ page. And I think what I am encouraging folks to do right now, as soon as you get this, wherever you are in your funding relationship and utilizing, use this as a guide for awareness, for making sure that you are collecting information accurately and are able to report the information as it is asked for on the forgiveness application. Keeping in mind also that most lenders that we have heard of intend to utilize some sort of an electronic version of this. So being in touch with your lender and understanding what they are going to expect, I think is really important. I also hope that you will, watch our website for upcoming trainings. We have a recording of the last forgiveness application session that we held, but we know that process is being updated again, so please do watch for further trainings. So my best recommendation is if you borrowed before June 5th, then you need to be in communication with your lender if you have any doubts of your ability to have spent or spend the funds in the 8-week period in the 75-25 to ensure that they are going to incorporate the terms of the Flexibility Act and extend your ability to expend those funds differently. If there's any doubt at all to be able to meet, whether it's the 60 or the 75, once again, that's where I would encourage you to talk to an SBDC advisor or one of our business recovery consultants, really looking at your expenditures and make sure that they have been calculated accurately. I know a question that I've had recently is some folks were able to take advantage of the FFCRA, which we'll talk about more in just a moment, the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, and the paid sick leave portion to receive some coverages by using the tax credit to pay for leave required for by that act. And they were using payroll software, and they discovered that when they were getting concerned that they actually hadn't expended sufficient PPP funds on payroll, they had to look at and calculate to make sure that they were accurately notating which payroll periods might have been covered by the paid sick leave of the FFCRA tax credit or the PPP fund. So really looking at your records and making sure that you are accurately accounting for and keeping records on those payroll periods is going to be really key. And our experts can help you make that clear. So please do reach out to them. So we probably could spend the entire hour on funding. Are there any more questions on specific?
Yeah, we've got 3 more.
Okay.
So I think this one's going to be a quick answer. You can get both loans, the PPP and the EIDL.
You can absolutely get both the PPP and the EIDL. Economic Injury Disaster Loan, is a lengthier loan that is also for, typical business expenses that you would occur in the, in your regular activities that might not be covered by the PPP. You can absolutely get both. You just want to watch the way that you keep your records so that you can accurately report on how you use the PPP for forgiveness purposes, and the EIDL in case of a future audit, because they do have specific limitations on how they can be used, but they absolutely can both be used to keep your business operational.
Another question then is, so this business took out money from their personal savings to pay their employees while they were closed, and now that they are reopened, they're wondering if they can still apply for EIDL and PPP, either or, and be able to pay themselves back for the amount that they paid to their employees, and then still have the debt forgiven.
That is a little bit more complicated. There is no one easy answer to that. You know, the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, does have some specific guidance about expenses paid and incurred during the covered period. Recouping expenses outside of the covered period is not. That is not how that particular loan is designed. But there's certainly maybe ways to, you know, make payments if there's like, you know, retirement account payments and other things that are incurred and paid during the covered period. So once again, that's a great one to call in and talk to one of our business recovery consultants about the details on how you appropriately apply for funds needed for continued operations, and then how you account for those and what are allowable expenses during the covered period.
Okay, and then this last question, I've got two people kind of asked the same question, so I'm combining them both. So what does a business do if they've been denied the economic injury disaster loan? And so how do they go about applying for reconsideration? And then what would be some of the reasons that the SBA is not approving them?
That is a great question. And actually, we have just been talking about making sure that we fully understand the reconsideration process. And there is a website, and I am making a note right now. I do not have it at hand. We will be placing it on the website, but in the meantime, Kyle, I'm going to make sure I get you the email address for reconsideration. I will also tell folks that they should be able to go in the portal if they've already, if they've already been established and they have their application number, they should be able to go through the portal. But Kyle, I'll send you that email, and if you will be able to share that with folks after this, that would be great. Will that work?
That would be great, yes.
And so just real quick, some of the reasons, what's interesting is sometimes it's just, it could just be a confusion of the terms on the application. I was told, and I'm going to read this exactly because I also have to tell everybody, my role with UTSA for most of these years has been focused on HR. I always say I get to focus on the people side and not the money side. I've had a lot of crash course in the money side. I've usually passed off the actual loan application process to my colleagues who are much better at that. So some of these terms are not things that I'm always using, but what I understand is there is sometimes a confusion in the way operating expenses versus cost of goods are entered on the application that can cause a problem. There's issues of gross costs of operations, maybe misrepresenting the impact on the business. And so those are just a couple of the big ones that came out. Also, sometimes there have been issues of being able to verify the bank account holder that did cause those to get some of those automatic rejection notice. So they're absolutely have the right to two courses of appeal for reconsideration. So absolutely get your documentation together. And I will make sure everyone has the information on how to apply for reconsideration. Thank you for asking. We definitely want to get that message out there that you can and should apply for reconsideration. So we have a few more things I definitely want to get to. So I'm going to go ahead, and if you have more funding questions, that's wonderful. I'm glad to hear it because it also tells us what we need to make sure we're providing in some of our upcoming town halls. But I'm going to go ahead and just touch very quickly. The other funding information that we have under funding is about some very specific opportunities for community funding, for the USDA specific rural development opportunities. There are GoFundMe relief initiatives, and one specific resource to the those in personal services might be the Professional Beauty Association. We had the link to the Texas Restaurant Association's funding, but that is not currently available. We understand just the demands on that have been so heavy, but I just want you to know the Texas Restaurant Association has been extremely active. It's just the demands on that were so heavy that is not available anymore. So I want to dive really into, I want you to be aware of resources. We're not going to go too deep in them, but I want you to know about some of the resources that are available to every employer from the Business Recovery Accelerator. And one is our Back to Business Handbook. And this is a PDF, but it's a very interactive PDF. So I'm going to see if it will open. Yes. And so what we have collected here is information, that will help you find information on regulatory guidelines and notices that you're required to provide to employees, as well as some informative posters to try to help keep safety and compliance top of mind. We have some management tips, checklists, and some best practices, as well as the ways to access all of our Small Business Development Center resources. So just real quickly, an example here, and I will show you where we also have these other places on our website. You can download all of the OSHA workplace posters to make sure that you have the safety notices. And I recommend keeping those fresh and going back to OSHA, also to the Department of Labor on the posters. They're providing great updated information on your responsibilities as well as your opportunities to help keep your workers safe and be compliant in any of the responsibilities that you have. I really think that the Texas Health and Human Services, Department of State Health Services website has just got some of the greatest visuals in keeping people aware and just keeping things top of mind in terms of safety and the current pandemic. And so I encourage you, to download this, keep it on your desktop, and you can just very easily print these out or email them to folks, email them to your employees to keep them top of mind. So I hope you will check this out and share it with others as well. In addition, under employee resources, we tried to make these things as fingertip as we can. So whether you're looking under funding or you're looking under employer resources, know that there are details on how you can access and utilize the Paycheck Protection Program, but also FAQs to help you understand your specific responsibilities, both in the application process and in documenting for the forgiveness process. So all of these FAQs, can help you out with those issues. An issue that I'd like to really spend a little bit more time on right now, because I've had so many questions. As a matter of fact, last week, every question that I had from a small business employer was around paid sick leave. The Families First Coronavirus Response Act provided some very specific guidelines for paid sick leave responsibilities. And so I want you to know that we have, linked to kind of a good overview of the temporary rule providing that paid leave under the FFCRA. There are, I think, some very easy to understand fact sheets that kind of give you a snapshot of what your responsibility are as an employer, including that notice that every employer is required to provide, and whether you are posting it in the workplace because you have folks who are showing up, or you have remote workers, you need to provide this notice to them, whether you mail it to them, whether you provide it as the PDF, whether you text it to them. You want to show how you've provided this notice to every worker, because if you have anywhere from 1 up to 499 employees, you're a subject employer to the Family First Coronavirus Response Act. And every employer with at least 1 and up to 499 employees does have a responsibility to, at a minimum, provide leave to an individual who is experiencing what they call the 1 to 3 qualified reasons for leave. And so that if that individual has been ordered to quarantine or isolate pursuant to a federal, state, or local quarantine, they have been advised by a medical professional to self-quarantine, or they are experiencing symptoms and seeking medical diagnosis, they are eligible for 2 weeks of paid leave at that time in order to meet that required obligation for safety. And it is the employer responsibility to do that. And the FFCRA Act provides a method of tax relief that would pay for that leave. And that gets a little bit more complicated. I'm not going to delve too deeply into that, but please know that the coronavirus tax relief information is very detailed from the IRS. I encourage business owners to contact their tax professional, or if they are utilizing a payroll service, to ensure that they understand how to enter the information into that payroll software or to their payroll provider, and understand how they can receive any funding for that. Now, if you choose to utilize your PPP for leave, please know that that is distinct. There is not, there's not a double dip on paid leave for required quarantine with the FFCRA and PPP. It's also important to note that the FFCRA, I call it, it's a 1 bite process. You get 1 bite if someone is ill or quarantined, or chooses, what if somebody chooses to get tested and is quarantining while waiting for the answer, and it turns out they're negative, that you only have that 1 opportunity to receive that tax relief. So that extended FMLA FFCRA coverage doesn't extend to multiple courses of quarantine or absence. Now, there's another factor, because there are other types of leave. There are caregiving leave and the child care school closure leave. And this is where what many small business owners will have heard of, the small business exemption comes into play. Because if you have fewer than 50 employees, you might be eligible for exemption for these second 2 types of leave, based on being a small business and it being and creating an inability for you to continue to operate. And the FAQs for the FFCRA are extremely rich. I have to commend the Department of Labor on how quickly they put together these very, very detailed FAQs, and explaining, who actually is a covered employer. So that's basically anybody who employs fewer than 500 employees. There's a really rich document in FAQs. And I want to call your attention. I hope I'm not making anyone dizzy by, let me see if it will let me just hop back up to FAQ number 4 is the small business exemption. But once again, I want you to note, it is an exemption from the child care related paid sick leave and expanded family medical leave. So in other words, these are the caregiving, or these, school and child care covered leaves. So if a business has fewer than 50 employees and meeting those standards of leave, that expanded leave, that additional 2 weeks, that additional 10 weeks would jeopardize that business, then that individual, can assert that small business exemption. Please know that there's no certification for this. There is nothing to send to the Department of Labor. The FFCRA is a complaint-based process. So if an employee were to complain to the Department of Labor that they felt that their FFCRA rights had not been met, then the Department of Labor would investigate and they would make that request. So if you are looking to pursue this, small business protection for that extended leave, please document it effectively and communicate effectively with your employees. Now, my recommendation is that everyone become aware. So if prior to this point, you're a business with fewer than 50 employees, so you really had not thought about the Family Medical Leave Act because you were not yet a subject employer, understand for the purposes of this act, as of April 1st and through December 31st of this year, 2020, if you have even one and up to 499 employees, you are a subject employer. And so becoming aware of this and engaging in the interactive process, in other words, when an employee communicates to you either that they are ill, that they suspect that they've been ill, that they've been ordered to quarantine, or if you have that local quarantine and someone requests this leave, you must engage in the interactive process and determine that individual's eligibility. Once again, this circumstances alter cases, so we really have to read these guidelines. Make sure this is just a really important page to be aware of the information about the total requirements of the Act, the tax opportunities of the Act, the notice you are required to provide to employees. I really like that last poster I was showing there. I think that's it provides a great visual both for the employer and for the employee to understand both their responsibilities and the opportunities with this act. So all of this information is available. And once again, we can always drill down to it very specifically with any individual's case. Kyle, do we have any FFCRA questions before I talk about Texas Workforce Commission?
Yes, we do have one. Can the 2 weeks be split? The employee is out for 4 days with COVID symptoms, but then tests negative, but then the employee returns to work the following week. Can the second week be used if a future positive diagnosis warrants a quarantine?
That is a really great question. I don't know if that detail is covered. I know that that does lead us to another requirement, which would be the state guidelines, which reflect the CDC guidelines on required quarantine, during testing. I think for a lot of folks, usually that requirement has been that full 2 weeks. I think if there were a medical exception and it were documented, it would seem reasonable that someone could still take advantage of the tax credit, but we might need to look into that a little bit. I will say this, I strongly encourage anyone who is looking to take the tax credit to be in contact with their tax professional to make sure that they fully understand how to apply for this and how to keep the appropriate records. I will say that if you are meeting all safety requirements for quarantine or reported, or suspected, illness, and you are not using the FFCRA, you can elect to utilize your PPP funds in any way for allowed leave in your workplace and still have it be considered appropriate payroll costs that would be eligible for forgiveness. That's one of those, the circumstances could alter the case, and we probably need to delve a little bit deeper into that. If I find an easy answer, I will be sure to share it. So please, if you don't mind sharing your email, I'd be happy to follow up with you, or you are welcome to follow up with me. And Kyle, you're welcome to share my email address with anyone as well.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. Great question.
And another question just came in, but I think you're probably going to answer this when you go into talking about the Texas Workforce Commission. So, but it's what is the employer's responsibility regarding their employees coming back to work when the business reopens? If an employee chooses to stay unemployed because they are making more money than they would if they were working, will the business owner be held liable?
Well, I think whoever that was, and your check's in the mail. That was a great question, which leads us right into the Texas Workforce Commission's expected reporting of work refusal. And I put this first because it's one of the most common questions that I am getting these days from business owners, you know, when they are ready to have their employees return to work. And they are finding that some of those individuals are not willing or not able to come to work. I think that TWC has done every business owner, every employer and every employee a service by creating an absolutely objective process for notating work refusal. And that is that I wish TWC had done this before, because I think that this issue has come up in other times when someone was claiming, you know, unemployment, but work was on offer. The interesting thing about our current crisis is that there are legally defensible reasons folks might not be able to return to work, largely around caregiving, childcare not being available, and their schools being closed. So the great thing about this work refusal documentation is if you have made a bona fide offer to an employee who had been out on unemployment, and you've received the notice and you've been fulfilled you know, all your notice requirements, and you've now made an offer to this individual and they have declined that offer, the great thing is you now have this no-fault objective way to report on that. And, and I would encourage folks, when they are making the offer and receiving a you know, a rejection of that offer, to let their employees know, okay, you know, this is the information that TWC is asking of us, and this is what we will be, you know, reporting. So just absolutely objective. Whatever that person tells you, that's what you report. Prior to this, the only way to report to TWC that someone had refused work was their fraud hotline. And often it's not, you know, it might not have been fraud. Now, some folks may be telling you that, oh, I'm not coming back because I'm making more money. If that's the case, then you put other and you put exactly what they said. It's your responsibility as an employer only to respond objectively. And this is the great thing also, because if you respond in whatever way they respond, then there is no, you know, there can't be any claims of, you know, termination or anything. You respond that you made the offer. And also the great thing about that is, especially if you are operating under a covered period from the first round of PPP and looking to expend, you know, that 75% and maximize your full-time equivalent employees, you will be able to show and be able to perhaps use the safe harbor. If someone does not return to work, it won't count against your total full-time equivalent workforce reporting for the PPP for forgiveness. So this is the, I just really have to commend the Texas Workforce Commission. I think they did a great job in creating this very objective tool. I think it's very simple for employers to use. It's just got all of the objective information you should have on your worker, and just, you know, and you just report factually on the information provided. So that is another link that we provide here. So that employer work refusal documentation, everyone bookmark it and be prepared to provide that information. Now, if you have laid anyone off, and it's really just, you know, it's only, you know, one or two, or, you know, just a small number of folks. I know that a lot of employers have been asking me, do I have any responsibility to report? And in that case, it's not so much that you don't have a specific responsibility to report that, but you do need to make sure that you are responding to a request for, you know, notice of unemployment claims. So you'll respond with the appropriate information. I also think TWC has done a great job here on just providing an overview of employers and how claims are will be impacting them. I think probably everyone understands that, you know, unemployment, you know, tax rates will be going up in the future. The best thing that you can do is make sure that you're providing accurate information and engaging in whatever the TWC requests of you. But this is also a great page just to mark and note, you know, the opportunities and the responsibilities that TW has set for employers. I think I would also like to still call attention to, if any of you are, you know, sole proprietors, you know, self-employed individuals, TWC I think is still offering some good information on in what way you might qualify for any pandemic unemployment assistance in a way that you might not previously have qualified for any kind of a benefit, you know, prior to the pandemic. So this is also a really great site, I think, that TWC has provided. And then finally, I think that really understanding the impact of chargebacks, making sure you are accurately reporting to TWC when the cause of a workplace separation has been the pandemic. You really want to make sure that you're, you know, providing that information accurately. But this is also a great site to go to understand the way that unemployment tax rates are determined, which we know will probably be changing in the upcoming year because of the incredible demand on the system. But also it just explains what is a wage verification notice, you know, who is a reimbursing employer, what are all of the definitions, especially, you know, you get this letter or you get a call from TWC and, you know, maybe you've never had a claim before. So this is a great website to better understand your responsibilities. Kyle, I know I want to be able to answer questions, so I'm just going to very quickly highlight the remaining resources, and of course I got out of the remaining resources on our site that I want everyone to be able to call on. We have information on cybersecurity, including a recorded cybersecurity best practices for small businesses. So I hope folks will check that out. We have detailed information on safety, and I just want to highlight really quickly, the Texas Department of State Health Services provides tremendous detail on the minimum recommended health protocols for reopening that are included in the governor's reopening executive order. They have great posters on COVID, best practices, information for specific businesses and employers by industry type. OSHA also has created an incredibly rich page with some specific samples of posters, simple steps all workplaces can take, and then specific guidance for developing safety plans by industry. Of course, the CDC also has great detail. Some of this is the same information that's linked from the Department of State Health Services. And then they've also provided this great workplace reopening decision tree that I think every business can utilize to better understand their particular individual risk, as well as their ability to call on resources to help manage that. And I always like to remind people that the Texas Department of Insurance is a bureaucracy designed to work for you, Texans. I would say that a lot of times folks don't know that we have an incredible resource for consumer protection in the state of Texas when it comes to purchasing of insurance. The Texas Department of Insurance put up a site right away to make sure that business owners know what their opportunities, responsibilities, and also recourse is if they have any questions about insurance during this time. So please take advantage of those resources. I definitely want to open up for questions. I just want you to know that this website is designed to be friendly. So if you don't find it friendly, please let me know. I want to know what other resources you would be looking for on this site. Kyle, I'm sorry, I've dragged on too long about employer services.
Oh, no. I think it's all been very beneficial, and I've learned a lot myself, so I've been taking notes. We do have two questions, and they kind of go back to the funding part.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so the first one is, will you be updating the website when PPP or the or injury loan guidelines change or get extended?
So one thing that's a really great question. So what we have elected to do is make sure that the links that we are providing are to the current SBA page. So whenever SBA get updates, that's what we're linking to. What we are trying to do is like note specific deadlines. So we will put these, as a matter of fact, my wonderful webmaster, she said, okay, I'm gonna put it about like 3 or 4 different places, and I think she did. So she updated the extension of the deadline several different places, but the FAQs and the general information about the application will always be linked back to the SBA from this site. So you don't have to worry about going to SBA and maybe getting lost. If you come here, you're going to find, you're going to have that direct link to the SBA. If you go here, you're going to have that direct link to the SBA and Treasury on all of the PPP guidelines, as well as the tax credit. Now, one thing we have tried to do is when we know about something new that's either coming, down, preparing to come down, like we'll try to post a notice as soon as we find out some information. So this had been a notice of closing, and so now it's a notice of extension of the program. But please come to the website, and if you're not finding, what you're looking for, then that is a great time to give us a call.
All right, and then the last question is having outstanding debt an impact on the decision of whether or not you get an economic injury disaster loan?
So I think that there are certain types of debt that might require further information. If there has been, if there's a delinquency in some way, but there's repayment, there's a repayment process, sometimes that isn't as clear in the application, and so that might be good grounds for reconsideration. Also, because the economic injury disaster loan is a little bit different than other SBA loans, and at certain amounts there is no request for collateralization, and technically there's not a requirement for collateralization up to a certain amount. Sometimes someone might have gotten a response that they had an inadequate credit history. That doesn't mean that they cannot request reconsideration. So absolutely, if you have not applied yet, I think it's a great time to talk to one of our business recovery specialists, because they can help you understand the questions that are being asked for in the application, and those things that might be alternative supports for the request, and they can also help if you're asking for reconsideration. So I can't tell you the absolutes, because my understanding is there is opportunity to be considered in ways that you might not have been considered for traditional lending.
And while you were talking, we got one last question. And so they asked, when is the deadline for the PPP loan forgiveness application?
So, okay, so technically it can be any time past the end of the covered period. So the covered period cannot be extended past December 31st. And the application cannot be, I believe it's more than 60 days after the end of the covered period. That is a great question, and I want to answer that accurately, so I'm going to write it down right now, Kyle, and I'm going to get back to you because I don't want to be inaccurate. So if you would like to give that person my email, or if you'd like to give me their email, I want to make sure, and I will share that with you. So if you'd like to share that with everybody, I would
Okay.
like to be accurate.
If you would, yeah, answer that question, and just email me the answer. We'll share that email with everybody, or we'll email that answer out to all our participants from today.
And I want to say one more thing about forgiveness. You know, it's been a little bit of a moving target. I'm sure many folks know. Obviously, the Flexibility Act, you know, made some changes. There are more proposed changes. I always like to deal with the facts as we know them at the moment. But just I would also like to address, you know, yes, there are some proposals that forgiveness will be simplified even further for amounts under, you know, I think the most common guideline has been suggested that anything under 150,000 will basically be an affirmation process rather than, you know, a very detailed forgiveness process. But we don't know yet. So what we need to operate on is what we know today. So I just want to assure you, any answers that I will send will be about where we stand today. And then we'll hope you'll keep tuning in and letting us know and in connecting with us. And as we get more information, we'll certainly be sharing that. So thank you for letting me be so long-winded, Kyle. I apologize for running over, and I thank everybody who has stayed with us. Should I give you back control of the screen?
Oh, that's all right. We are just going to wrap it up from here. And so we have recorded this webinar, so we will be sharing that recording with everybody via email, as well as the answers to your questions that we'll be getting responses from. And then also we will share Deirdre's contact information with y'all as well. So with that, we will go ahead and end this webinar. And we just have webinars every day this week. So we hope that you'll come back. Tomorrow's is going to be on social media. So we look forward to having y'all back tomorrow if y'all have signed up for the future webinars.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. And y'all have a great day.